Welcome to our first edition of Drastic Talks. I'm here with Lee Odess, and you know what? You're a pro. I've watched so many videos of you already. I'm sure you're super tired of introducing yourself, but you're so interesting. So I would love it if you just took a sec, just tell people, who you are, what you're up to, and we'll go from there.
I appreciate that. That's very kind of you.
Again, who am I again?
Yeah, it's funny what people find interesting, but no, I appreciate that. So, like you said, my name's Lee Odess. I'm the CEO of a group 337 is what we call it, which is we have a couple things going on right now. One of them is we do consulting work within the access control, security, visitor management community. We also then have, we'll call it a media platform, if you would, to where we are creating stories and storytelling and conversations and everything from inside access control, which is this thing here. We also have inside visitor management, inside multifamily access control. We produce 7 podcasts at this point and 3 newsletters. But it's really what we tried to do is we thought there was an opportunity as the shift in how people consume information, want to have a conversation. Really, we thought there was an opportunity to do something there. So we just started a newsletter, and it's grown from that point forward. And it's been, I think, out of the negative of, say, COVID and what's happening, the positive side for our business was it was timely given what happened in March. We started in January. So I find us to be very lucky.
Yeah. Talk about a perfect storm. Before we get specifically into access control and security and what that means for real estate and all that kind of good stuff, you weren't always in this. You were something else not that long ago. I mean, it was kind of really, I think it's interesting. I mean, you say it's amazing what people find interesting, but the whole, access control, the whole ability to use devices and connections and Internet of Things. Tell me about the lock business.
No, I definitely, yeah. So it was recently with a pretty large manufacturer of locks. They, given market, they're number 1, number 2. They're real big. Own a bunch of brands that you may know. But on that side, both consumer and on the commercial side, there was already an enormous amount of changes happening because people were going from mechanical, which is predominantly what the marketplace was, and moving into exactly the key. And now they're moving into the electronic side. Now, if you look at those markets, there's a difference between, I think, what people wanted them to be to what they actually are. And this is where some of the changes were happening. What they were is more or less motorization and an app in a lot of cases. And then the people wanted them to be smart. So I would call those more motorized. Then we got a little bit in connected, and you saw some somewhat okay user experiences, but not fantastic to what people believed. And now we were starting to see the at least moving in the right direction of what the smart lock industry should look like. I spend most of my time now, though, on the commercial side, and you are seeing, though, the consumerization side of the expectations that you have. Like, for instance, the industry for a long time, the idea of having conveniences introduced to it, like using your phone, was seen as something insecure. So they would be hesitant to allow that to happen. But people now are saying, like, I use it all the time for everything. So they're challenging the status quo thinking of the industry, and it's being forced to catch up with that. And then now put on top of that health concerns from COVID and the rest, and that's now just driving. So it's a fascinating time, in my opinion, right now with our industry, because it's a lagger a lot of times on the innovation side, and it's being forced to really catch up.
This may be tangential or whatever, but you're talking about, quote unquote smart locks versus, motorized. And I heard you talk about the difference between, things that are smart or connected versus intelligent. And I want to get to that into a second, but I think just the sheer scale of some of this stuff, I think people really fail to understand. I mean, I use, your hotel room key on your phone as kind of a shorthand example with some of our clients of how, technology can allow for frictionless, easy experiences. And I heard you say how a lot of the stuff in security is about putting up barriers as opposed to actually being frictionless. But there is none of that stuff's really connected very much. It's like me and the door. And then there's like, well, all the doors in my hotels might be different depending on what country they're in. And it's like, it becomes really, really big to think about. How do people even just start to think about, we think about commercial real estate, retrofitting, redoing, where do you even start with some of this stuff?
Yeah, so it's interesting. And a couple of things that you brought up there, I'll kind of go backwards a little bit to go forward as we do it. But so if you think about it, a lot of the locks in the access control industry, the use case of actually what you just talked about, they weren't actually manufactured for it. So you've got products that were built for 30 years and they haven't changed very much, but the use cases and the needs and the desires of them have. But the way our products have been forever built was that you hang them and you leave them alone. Now you're seeing that introduction of convenience before we get to health. But the convenience side, like the hotel aspiration use case, was about convenience. Mm-hmm. And again, I go back to, there's a lot of friction when it comes to safety products and convenience. And they weren't built for it, frankly. And they've figured out how to make it okay. But just like a lot of connected products and smart products in the house and the commercial side, you can tell that it's not there yet based off of the things like inconsistency of experiences. For instance, if you go to use it, it sometimes works. Yeah. There's never a guarantee that it 100% works. Now, you could argue that in technology like this, you're never necessarily going to always have 100%, but I think we could do better than we're currently doing now if products were purposely built for the use cases that you have in mind. So my step one of what people should do, in my opinion, is start asking more questions when it comes to the use case that they particularly have, and have these manufacturers people actually show you the products to meet those use cases, not the, does it get there kind of, it sort of needs to get there and work backwards to the product needs to fit what the people need for it to do in mind, and get away from this idea that you don't have to worry about it. Like, as long as it's secure, then the rest of it's nice to haves. It's like, no, there's things now that are must haves. Yeah. And I think the community is starting to ask the right questions.
You're talking a little bit about design thinking or human-centered design,
yes.
Which I think a lot of, maybe this is my own viewpoint, but a lot of manufacturers, they kind of forget who they're designing for. And so if as you say, if the technology works, if it's secure, but the UX or the UI or the experience is terrible, people will forgive that. But actually, they've got it inverted probably a little bit. Or it needs to be.
I would even go as far as saying that in a lot of times we're talking commercial. In the commercial world, our industry never paid attention to the end user, because the end user in our industry was the person with the card and the reader on the wall. And frankly, we didn't even know who you were. We knew you were a card number and a facility code. Other than that, there really wasn't many people. So like the identities of the individuals didn't matter. It was a card number. So the people we actually built our products for were the dealer network and the administrators of those systems. So the people that were like facilities or the security department, whatever it might be, they were the people that we built it for. So that's why you see the user interface be very specific to them. You don't see a lot. Now, when the phone got introduced to this entire thing, the user experience then at that point mattered, because now you have somebody that's actually driving the overall experience, purchasing decisions, if you would, of who they want to work with and that, because if it doesn't work, they're going to complain. And at some point, they'll rip the thing out or they'll go get a new one. So you're just now seeing our industry actually start to pay attention to who the end user is. And because of that, human centricity and the human design, the good at understanding UX, that stuff is going to matter a lot more. And you're going to start to see the old incumbent companies either partner with people that understand that or bring them on. And you're going to see a lot of startups now have an opportunity to suck the oxygen out of the room as far as when it goes to the storytelling and the conversations, because they actually start a lot of them at that end user and work their way backwards. And they're going to start driving, I think, a lot of the conversation. They are now, frankly.
Yeah. Well, I think we're seeing a lot, even in a lot of different industries, the notion that the consumer experience, the return on experience is becoming a really big competitive advantage. And people who don't get it right are going to miss big time. And I think that even counts, as something as simple as it's not simple, but the stuff that we're talking about in your category in terms of access control. Excuse me one sec. You mentioned COVID a few times, and I know it's on everybody's mind, certainly mine. Here we are in our bunkers doing this interview where we'd probably maybe be in real life, IRL, I don't know. So what do you see as some of the long-term ramifications of this COVID thing? And I mean, I'm working with a team at PwC that's really kind of trying to think about the future work experience, 5 years from now, what that can be like. But it's a really big nut to crack, just in terms of scale. So what do you think some of the long-term things are going to be?
Yeah, so my belief, and again, speaking specifically to the access control and visitor management, security, video, that side of it. So a lot of our products have always been on the sort of exterior of the building. So it's an interesting relationship that we have compared to some of the stuff that's inside the building in a lot of ways, right? So, and our role has always been around the safety side. And that's the sort of place. It's like we kept bad people out so they didn't shoot people. Like that's literally what our main job was to do. So all of a sudden, we have an entirely new use case around health, because I talk about how access control is having their sick building syndrome moment at this point, because it's never mattered before, like our product would get people sick. Now people touching things and they're paying attention to that, like the button that you press in the elevator, never thought about that before, right? Like, so all of a sudden we're now participating in that. On top of that, we are typically a place that people are going to now to put measures in place to be able to do things like assure who the person is, understand by asking questions are they healthy or not, like things like that historically, again, we've not done. So visitor management systems, all of a sudden, which were for predominantly most of the people that would do them, was a way to, like, a cool factor or compliance around capturing an NDA or whatever that might be. That product now has turned into really the front end digital interface of how you engage with people, to know even not just visitors, but everybody at this point is now considered a visitor into the space, because you have to collect information, make assurance, keep some people out. Like, so it's this weird Venn diagram of overlap of the old with the new. So that's a long way to me get into. So what do I think are some of the long-term effects? Number one, I think health is now a conversation. You mentioned frictionless before, and seamless was also, like, that was a term we were using about on the convenience side of what mobile technology and facial recognition and things like that were doing. Now they're considered health devices, and it's about touchless. Like, so those types of things are going to stick. Now, I'm a believer that right now we're in hysteria mode when it comes to people trying to find the different things that they need in order to get back to work safe. And I think it'll come down a little bit. There'll be definitely a new watermark. Some of the phase changes that we had before around, like, touchless and Bluetooth technologies, visitor management, they've accelerated. And I think those things will get adopted and would be normal. You've seen, like, one that's not, I'll tell you, like, so, like, fever cameras and temperature related cameras, right? So here's my thoughts on those. And this is not the technical side of it. This is I would say more of from a business end of it and sort of a societal side. Right now, that is something that people believe is going to give them some sense of safety and health. And we call it, you saw it after 9/11, it was called security theater. And that's important. There's security theater and security measures, both of them. Where it goes wrong is when it's used as, like, the thing that you do to make the determination if you're hit sick, because there's a lot of things that are wrong with those technology. It's also awkward in some cases, like this idea that you're going to take this thermal gun and bring it to somebody's head. You can just, you just do it once and you find out, like, that doesn't feel good. I don't really want to do that. So, like, that whole relationship's
base.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel good. So, like, I can't imagine that that's going to stick. But I do think health theater in cases, which is equally as important, in my opinion, to health measures, is going to need it, because it's about trust. So that's another thing that I think is going to stick, is this new conversation around trust mattering. How do you do that? So, like, notifications, data visualization, like, signage, things like that were considered nice to have before, are definitely sticking in that case. I do believe one of the bigger ones are going to be the the introduction now of our industry into the CEO, CFO, CMO, CHRO, CISO, all of those, they care more now about our industry than they did before. And that's a big one.
They have to. They have to. I mean, I've been in, countless meetings about all these different topics, like it's amazing to me, like right now in one of our, like you can only one person per elevator. I mean,
can we talk about that for 1 second?
Trying to think about that, in the morning.
But think about this. The fact that PwC cares about our industry is interesting to me, because we think about it. I mean, that's a change. Like we were historically an industry that a lot of people from the consultative side, the SI side, like a lot of these areas that come more from the logical end in like business continuity. Like we were a business continuity thing only with like active shooter in a lot of ways. And it was somewhat of a blip on sort of the overall map. There was definitely people that care about that. There's a whole industry that we're in that does, but that level of conversation that I've been having from interesting third parties, I'll call them, from our industry now, I find that exciting. And that is a massive sea change in our industry of us going more mainstream than the cottage side, which then brings a bunch of great stuff. It also brings a bunch of, I'll call it negative stuff, because there's a bunch of conversations that have to happen around, like, I don't know, like what could go bad, that need to happen, that are good conversations to have. So that's my, I'll get off.
Yeah, no yeah, we're absolutely thrust into this moment where it's on everybody's mind, and it's like, I don't know. I know we're not supposed to say we're supposed to know things, but I have no idea how this is going to play out. Like, we're going to go back to, in the short run, maybe 15% of total occupancy. And when you think about a workforce of our own, I mean, I think we're about 8,000 people in Canada. That's a lot of empty space. And, I'm wondering what your kind of viewpoint is on, now when we talk about buildings and IoT and access security and all this kind of stuff. How do you think remote work, the deprioritization potentially of our office spaces, impacting going forward?
Yeah, I think it's an evolution of the workspace versus the sort of, conversation a lot of people want to have about, like, it's peg to peg binary. Like, so I just think workplace gets reimagined in a lot of cases. I really am a big believer of the need for collaboration spaces. As somebody that works out of their house, like I miss the coffee shop and the ability to have human contact. And I don't know about you, but I find like Zoom all day long, and it's well documented at this point, massively exhausting. And just
I'm ready for bed now.
Yeah, no, for real. That's why I have a beanbag here. I just take a nap. But no, I look at it, I think space gets just a reallocation almost of the usage of it in that case, and the reimagination of what we call work. Like I just saw this recent study that came, or an example they showed of a place in Japan, and that looked a lot like a coffee shop, and it was an office, like or a coffee shop that looked like an office. So I think about that. I think about reusing spaces that aren't necessarily like right now I live outside of a major city, and this idea that I have to travel into a city to get to a space, but I probably passed, I don't know, 1,000 spaces that could be like an office, if you would, if it was just reimagined. I believe, if I'm going to talk about technology side, it accelerates some of the technologies that are needed in order for that stuff to happen. I'm fascinated with the thought around how do you need these spaces for collaboration, but how do you do that with safety in mind now, with health, right? Like it's like those things don't, like, that's like square peg round hole when you think about it. It's like, you don't want to go to this place to be sitting behind plexiglass.
No, that becomes Get Smart's cone of silence.
Yeah, it's like, it makes
nobody want.
You're better off sitting at home doing it on Zoom.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that the majority of us are kind of planning for, we'll call it a post-COVID or herd immunity vaccine, something that says, look, we can get together safely, but the conditions have changed and we're not going back. I mean, it's so weird. As a creative person, I'm thinking, I fundamentally understand that the world has changed, but at the same time, I'm kind of waiting to go back to the office.
Yeah.
I'm kind of expecting to go back to the way it was, but at the same time, I know that it's not. And one of the things that I find really interesting and why I think it's kind of like not necessarily a perfect storm for your industry and for commercial real estate generally, is that everybody's in the same boat, right? Come March, everybody went home. Like they turned the lights off, they turned the air conditioners off. Everything was just shut down. And I think a lot of organizations are using this now as a magic moment in time to reset everything and to rethink everything and to say, let's use this time wisely to fix what was shitty. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I guess, and I, it's so a couple of things. So if I was to go off of one thing you just said real quickly, it's like, I've started to think about like, do I really want to go back to the office? No, I don't actually. But what I want is interaction, and I want the sense of collaboration in that I don't get here. And frankly, I just want different textures. Like it blew my mind. I had to go drive to drop something off to my brother. It was 6 hours away. Like I started to appreciate that silence and like sitting in the car and making phone calls and listening to the radio that like I before was like, ugh, I never wanted that. But now all of a sudden I did. So like, I started if you just break down the things that you're actually looking for, I think this has highlighted some of those cases. And how do we do it? Now, when it comes to access control, what I think sort of the impact that on the office space, what I think is something that I wanted to bring up that relates to it that has changed is, in my case, I do believe the relationships that we have now with places when it comes to access control has changed. What I mean by that, and that's like a dumb, obvious statement, but what I'll get to it. What I mean by that is historically, your identity when you came to the space was given. You were given a card, you brought it up and you tapped it. We talked about that. Now, when these spaces become dynamic, and especially if they become on demand, the relationship is you actually bringing your identity to the space, and it having to respond to who you are by authenticating who you are. So the technology needed in order to do that. You guys still there?
Yeah, I am. Sometimes my computer camera crashes. Hopefully it wasn't off for too long. Sorry about that.
No. I was saying, so I don't know where you lost me, but what I was saying was the relationship now changes with how you are. So instead of it being given identity, you bring your identity to the space,
yep.
which is a fundamental shift in our industry, where historically the value of our industry was based off the credential, the card, big money, hundreds of millions of dollars made off of those cards, believe it or not. And great, my dog just came in. Yeah, it's a poodle. Oh, nice. She's on the beanbag that I was talking about. Nice. Yeah, sorry.
I'm doing this like I can see.
Yeah, I know. Like that tells you that there's a user interface thing, right? But no. So the business has shifted in our industry, and it's something that actually from people that are buying these systems should start thinking about. Forever, you've been paying $25 per card, $15 per card. That business is going to zero over time, and it's now shifting to the identity and assurance that that these systems bring. So the ability to identify who you are and assure who you are, and the experience that is created based off of you doing that. That's been a fundamental shift that's happening in our industry that I would say our industry is having a hard time catch up with it. There's people that are out in front of it. But when you take a look at your buildings, what I'm interested in seeing is when people say, you know what, I want to make this building on demand now. It's like, okay, can your systems do that? Yeah. I don't know.
Do we have any systems? How old are our systems? Yeah, exactly. Are you still there? I think we might have lost Lee. Maybe his dog tripped on the internet cord.
All right, I'm back.
Okay, you're back. I thought maybe your dog like tripped on the extension cord.
Okay. No, yeah. I don't know what's going on.
No. I think people are very easy to forgive the technical glitches in this day and age right now.
I tell you what, I don't know. I live outside DC, so you never know. Like somebody could have done something or flown over with something and it hits it. So I don't know. Who knows? I have no idea. Sorry. I'm back.
That's okay, man. Hey, let's switch gears for a second because I want to ask you. I kind of hinted at it a little bit of this kind of weird thing between smart, automated, intelligent.
Yeah.
And, I think certainly from the consumer side, residential side, most of that stuff's not very smart. It's connected. Yeah. It's not very intelligent. It's not driven by any AI or RPA or anything like that. I'm curious, how would you help people understand the significant difference between a smart building where it needs to go versus where things are kind of now?
Yeah, so I would take a look at sort of the architecture and the structure of it. So a lot of these things are siloed amongst themselves, and they're like I said, they're not necessarily totally smart. They're electronic at this point, right? They have the ability to be turned on and off by a phone or a computer. There's some wires that connect them between them, but it's relatively low bar of quote unquote smart. So especially in the security and access control world, if you look at ours, so two parts. Or possibly three, but this idea that most of our stuff is done in response to something. It's not situational awareness. It's not, it doesn't do things on its own unless it's like a time clock. So like that, my definition of smart is like the ability for these things to sort of respond, but then also be able to do them on their own. The ability to understand what's happening, and maybe it knows that there's X amount of people in the building, so it morphs itself into how it works. But on the access control stuff, it's very binary and very siloed. You do see an aspect of integration that's done now, which gives sort of a head fake to the idea that it's integrated and smart because, I don't know, you can share identities through it, or if I open the door, it triggers a light, but it's still a low bar of intelligence on that end, to where, moving forward, my belief is these systems become features of a much larger value proposition and system. So I believe we're moving to building operating systems, to where you have these core tenant utilities that are there. They're a feature of a much larger, whether it's an interaction, it's a system that manages things automatic. You can have a lot of the sort of like if then it can understand patterns. It's dynamic, like, right, based off of a bunch of stuff, it responds to how it needs to be, and it creates a better value. On the access control side, low bar to me of what I want it to do is, when I show up to a place, and I've been there before, I want it to be like it's not the first time I've ever been there. And every single time now in access control, it's like the first time you've ever been there. You have to do a reintroduction. And if these systems become to get smart, it starts to know who I am. It understands my attributes, my behaviors, my habits. Mm-hmm. And it can respond to me. Like, it should know that I go to the 8th floor every single day. It should know that, my wife works in this building, so I have a different level of relationship with it than the person coming off, the delivery people that come to the space. Like it just knows those types of things, and the technology exists to do a lot of that stuff. The problem is that majority of the built world that's currently there now, those systems can't support that. No. And there's not a lot of standards, so that makes it hard. Yeah. And it's relatively expensive compared to the return on the investment of doing that, which I do now. That, again, if we bring it back to sort of the now, some of this health stuff is helping elevate the ROI, because you saw the business continuity end of it, right? Like what the impacts you have there. So it starts a different conversation. But I think we are moving in the right direction. I've seen a higher level of conversation from a lot of people across the aisle. I've seen people within our industry sort of start to stand up and have different conversations, like having software-centric relationships and conversations. I'm seeing an appreciation for the larger storytelling, because I actually think that is also needs to happen when you have these big companies start to be able to tell these stories too. That seems to move the industry forward. And then I see a customer base that's starting to see the value in them, and they're getting up far more interested in it. And I think you put all that into a pot and you stir it, and it starts to move it forward.
Well, it sounds to me like when let's go with your cooking analogy there. The recipe here, if you will, when a landlord or an organization cracks this and somehow figures how to scale it, I have to think that's got to be a competitive advantage for tenants, and for even if you go farther down to the employees. It's like, if I'm going to work for this company and this is the kind of building it's in, and this is the kind of experience that I'm going to have, access and control and all these kinds of things, that might be a lot better than, going to the competitor that doesn't have that frictionless experience.
Yeah, especially too if I, I'm working the sort of hybrid approach of an office in here, and if those places are going to have great experiences, I think, in order for people to go. And that great experience is not like, because they have gumball machines and things like that. No, it's sort of like, because I can have assurance that that room was cleaned and now the door's locked. Like things like that, and the air's on, like, because it's helping give healthy, healthy air. Like there's a different relationship now that thing is going to deliver. Now, I still think it needs to deliver some of the fun side of things, but it's also going to be, I just think the need for that experience to be elevated is going to drive a lot of this.
How do you think that they can balance safety and privacy? Because that's on everybody's mind. You talked about, it knows me. It knows I go to the 8th floor. It knows my wife works in the building. And some people's, like, the spider senses go off and they think about, I'm being watched, which we all are anyway. But talk to me a little bit about that sort of sacred balance between, usability, functionality, safety, privacy.
Yeah. So on a high level, like, I don't know why we have to have a conversation where it's like around you having to give up privacy in order to get this. Like, I think a handful of things. I think some of the business models that are in place in order for these things to happen haven't been thought all the way through. So that's why you give up some of the privacy and things like that in order to get, like, there's this belief that because how social media works, it also means how the Internet of Things needs to work. And it just doesn't. There's plenty of people out there that have built products that have shown that doesn't need to exist. So my answer to that basically is you don't have to.
It's a knee-jerk reaction then. People hear, this, that, and the other thing.
What
about privacy?
I don't blame them, and they should ask that question. And my question would, my answer, or if I was asking that question now, would be, this is where I believe organizations have to get more interested in this stuff so that they can ask the right questions and be able to have their specifications of what they want met by companies that are doing this stuff properly. There's a bunch of people that have systems set up the certain way they do, not because they're being malicious. It's just because maybe they haven't thought all the way through, or it's built off a model that was old before. Because if you think how a lot of these products are built, on average, they take like 2 to 5 years to come to market. Mm-hmm. And before that, it's probably 1 year to 2 years. Big companies, not like small agile companies, but they spent like 2 years putting the business plan together in order to get the green light and budgeting to go do this thing. So it's already like 5 to 7 years out. And if you think about the speed of change that of just around privacy that has happened in the past 7 years, a product that was designed on paper 7 years ago and highlighted to go do this, it isn't the same as it comes out at the back end when they bring it to marketplace. So so I guess the long and short of that is organizations and companies themselves have to prioritize this stuff. Like the fact that you have to have like everybody has to have a level of understanding around, user rights and privacy and the rest of it. And I'm by no means an expert in it. There's plenty of people that are, and they should go find them. And then the other side of it is that the expectation on the end from the end user is asking those things. And I guess, again, the spidey senses should go up when you hear that, but it shouldn't default to you have to give up, because you don't. There's plenty of examples of products and systems in place where you don't have to do that.
That's really interesting, because I think people automatically assume that in order to do X, I must do Y, but maybe not necessarily. They're not thinking about it in the right way.
No, I think to be fair to the people, I think it's the majority of the products that are out in the marketplace that use the business model based off of that those are the majority that they see and they hear.
I see.
And I think over time we'll see a shift of that, whether it's through legislation or it's through competitive drivers to end user demand. Like I think you put all those together and it'll create what's going to come out the back end. But I think we're getting to a point now where there are systems out there that can do what they want. Now, I also believe that there will all continuously and always be systems to where you could give up certain privacy to get stuff. And there may be, because you don't want to spend the money, rightfully so, don't have the budget, whatever it might be. So if you're going to go do that, you are going to go with one where they leverage a different business opportunity over here and value creation over there to fund this over there, right? Type model. There's big companies that do that all day long. So I think you'll have choices. You'll just have to decide what matters to you.
Yeah. I mean, I have to think for all these big organizations, I mean, as they think about going back, who's going to foot the bill for some of this stuff? And, what's the responsibility of the sort of the building owners versus the tenants? And it's just like a really big nut to crack.
It's a big nut. It's a big elephant that I don't think most companies aren't going to be able to swallow entirely. But I do think there's incremental steps of things that you can do. You could have aspirations to have automatic door openers in every one of your doors, but that could be costly. But there are things that you can do to sort of, and maybe that's the area you go, but then you don't do one of those other things, and it's sort of a long-term plan of iteration of adoption versus the all-in side.
Yeah, I doubt very much that most people or most organizations can go all in right away, especially when you're thinking about legacy buildings and all these things. It's like building something maybe from scratch right now is a very different proposition than trying to retrofit or refit a building that was built in the 60s.
Yep, 100%. Especially too, like in our industry, most of our products are built for new builds versus retrofit. So that's a whole nother conversation around the industry of ours retooling itself, if you would, to focus on existing buildings versus new construction. That's a whole nother world.
Whole other revenue stream, probably.
Oh, it's fantastic. Our industry has been forever. If you've noticed, most of our industry, you may have not noticed, but most of our sales on our buildings are, from an electronic standpoint, is the shell, not the core. So like interior doors is like we've been trying to get to interior doors forever. And this is now one of those moments where we believe we're going to start to see more interior doors get electrified versus being mechanical, because the use case of the health side is actually going to drive the need for, I don't know, that storage closet door that you didn't care about now can get you sick. Now you care.
Yeah. Well, and I certainly don't want to buy one of those skeleton key things that people are selling on Instagram to push the.
I know.
Hey, use this. It's like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? I can just use my pen.
Yeah.
I know all these different inventions have come up to keep you safe.
Yep.
But when you think about prioritization and the fact that it's a really big elephant or whatever. What do you think is most important to sort of property building owners right now? I mean, for a long time, it was really much about sustainability and green roofs and LEED certified and these kinds of things. What do you think now in this environment building owners find the most important, and how might they prioritize?
Yeah, I think it focuses around trust. And I would 100% focus there on what are the things that you need to do to deliver trust to the people that are coming into your building. And that could be a handful of things. It could be the visitor management system that has a front end system on it. It could be the elevator control that we talked about. It could be frictionless. It could be a handful of things. Did we freeze?
I think you froze. Yeah, you froze deep in thought, though. It's a good look. I'll wait for you to turn off and on your camera. That happens. Looks like you have the same issue I have in mine. This pause brought to you by Wheaties. I don't know why I said Wheaties, but I'll just take this as an opportunity to have a sip of my delicious water.
Hi,
you're back. Welcome back.
I don't know what happened there, but so it's really weird.
It's
not that many
sunflares. That's what it was.
Is that what it is? I don't know what's going on today. Anyway, so I was saying, so it's built around trust. That's what I would prioritize, and I would look at the systems and the technology, and I would center it around that trust side, and have those products and services and partners that deliver products that can help. And I think you can define that in many, many different ways. There's not one way. You have to do what you're comfortable with, what you're building, with the kind of culture you have, the budget you have, the rest of it. But it's really built around trust. So whether that's tracking density of buildings and signage, it's the visitor management side, it's sending out emails before that people fill out forms, it's the temperature thermal cameras, the automation of the elevators to door automation happening using facial recognition, all of that stuff. I think it's a combination of tools that are going to be able to deliver that to the people that utilize your space.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, so I'm having a moment. I wanted to ask you a follow-up question. I'm just trying to remember what it was. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, I was just going to make an observation about trust in terms of, because you know how you said earlier, it's like, people aren't worried about the foosball tables or the whatever machines, the candy machines or the free beer or whatever, if they work in ad agencies. And I think that they'd be willing to trade off some of those luxury items for trust, to say, hey, I could do without that other stuff as long as I know things are not going to get me sick.
Yeah, I mean, I do. Again, I think it goes back to the safety and security convenience side. There are areas I don't think you need to, because there's technology out there that you don't have to sacrifice, civil liberties and your own self in order for that to happen. I just think that's a lazy approach to solutions that I think you need to prioritize the human side of this again when you make selections of products.
I really, really like that. I think that it's a really great note for people. It's like, it doesn't have to be if this, then that.
Yeah.
Necessarily. And if you open up the aperture to the possibilities or, new products or whatever that's happening out there, you can actually get to where you want to go without giving away the farm.
Yeah. There's a desire to solution this to death with a hammer and just be like, I need hammers all day long. And you may not need a hammer. You may, but I think you can get into what type that you need and does it fit right.
I'm curious though, with all the buildings kind of shutting down and things were closed for a long time, do you think malls are ever going to come back and be in vogue? Shopping mall thing?
I mean, I would say I'm not an expert, but I'm curious when it comes to that. So I'll give you my opinion on it.
I'd love to know what you think, because I mean, I live pretty close to a shopping mall, and I see the parking lot is full all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we live near one too, and it's actually people use it. It's got a great food court that people use, and there's certain shops. I believe that there's the ability for that to be reimagined as well, and I don't think it'll go away. I think it'll look different. I'm interested in this distribution center aspect of things. I do believe that when things do open up, people are still going to look for experiential opportunities, and so there'll be. I think it'll just be reinvented in a lot of cases. Does it need to be 40,000 square feet and sort of sterile? No, I don't think it has to be. But I do believe that there will be aspects of it that will still be used. What's interesting to me is I can't walk down to a downtown area, but I can walk to a mall right now. So does that reimagine a downtown area? I don't know. I find that interesting.
And local is becoming certainly more important too, I think, for a lot of people. Hey, so one of the things I'm really curious about your particular industry, commercial real estate in particular, there's been a lot of voices, thankfully, about diversity, inclusion. How do you feel that's going in the sort of the commercial real estate industry? Do you feel like, it's gaining ground? Do you feel like it's becoming more equitable, or do you think it's still pretty much a man's thing or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it's still, being one myself and, male white guy, I'm cognizant of it. I think I think it's better. There's still a lot of work that has to get done. I've noticed that there's more of a desire for a conversation, at least, and an awareness of it, which is good. It's not enough, in my opinion. I think there's pockets of area that of some people that have a lot of insecurities and low emotional intelligence when it comes to what change means. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I mean, if I speak specifically, I'm more of an expert in my domain of this small sliver of the built environment, and we have a lot of work to do on our end from a diversity inclusion. We have people that are aggressively against it, and we have a whole group of people that actively want it. And I would say there's a whole bunch of people in the middle that don't fight it but aren't doing anything about it, and would be fine if it went that way, right? So I'm encouraged, if I was to say, based off of when like I entered the industry compared to I think now people that are entering into, when I think about my daughter entering in this space, I think it'll be a far more inclusive, better place, if you would, to be on that end. But we still have a lot of work to do.
It's almost, I mean, I don't know if this is appropriate to say or not, but it feels like it's almost like a double whammy. Not that I'm beating up on real estate, but it does seem like it's a bit of a old school thing, like man's game or whatever. And then you think about the particular business that you're in that's really tech driven. And there's always, we talk a lot about the disparity about women in tech and really trying to bolster that. So it was really just more of a curiosity for me, because I know that's really important to a lot of organizations, certainly our own.
Yeah.
So it's just curious.
No, there is. And we have our associations like Women in Security. So there is an effort and a push to go do that. There are a bunch of people that are trying to create more of a space for that to happen, because we all know it's the right thing to do. It never goes as fast as anybody wants. But also we're a heavy trade organization industry too, right? So
Sure.
Even there's not, but I've seen an uptick in at least the visibility, but there's still, I mean, we've recently had a case of somebody bullying a woman leader in our industry. So, I mean, you still see that type of stuff, but I think has more to do with people's insecurities than it does anything else. And the good news is there's plenty of people now that I feel are stepping up to speak out on that, where before you didn't do that, like that, you did not go against that grain. And now people are trying to balance the sort of wokeness side of it with the doing good and what's right part. And frankly, I'm one that thinks, they can go as woke and people can go as woke if they are doing good. Then I'll take some of the bad with the good to get the good.
Right. What a wild time to be alive, though. No.
Oh man, it's very rare where the societal fabric just gets completely brought apart and then smashed back together.
I know we're sort of running out of time, but I was saying, we have about 10 minutes left. There's a couple of things I want to get to, but I was saying to my kids, one starting university, the other one's just finishing up high school, and I'm like, we're living in a time right now where people are going to write their PhD dissertations about it. And there's going to be movies about it. It's like, where were you when COVID happened, and where Black Lives Matter happened, and where all this stuff kind of came to a head? It's really wild. Anyway, digression. Tell me, commercial real estate, digital twin. I know, great segue, right?
Totally. That's smooth.
I know.
Smooth.
I'm good at this. But, when we think about sort of the interplay between, digital and virtual and, physical, what's your thoughts about digital twins and its role in commercial real estate, and operations performance or health or safety of occupants? Do you see any play there?
Yeah, I do, and I think our industry, specifically in the access control security space, video, we're very early in it. But I'm encouraged by what I see, sort of the expectation that the systems could start to do this, the ability to sort of visualize the way that the systems are going to function and work, down to this ability to sort of remotely interact with it, like just all of that. and our systems being able to be extracted out and play in that field, I find fascinating, and I believe and I've seen enough now of people that are doing that type of stuff to know that it's not a case of if, it's a case of when. And I do believe as it continues to be normalized in conversation, and the people that do digital twins have to do a far better job, I think, of communicating the value creation of it, and bringing that down into not sexy places. Because we spend a lot of time talking about all the sexy stuff. Like, it's sort of like there's some very non-sexy stuff that needs to be part of it that I think it would become a sort of normal practice. It's going to start at the really big and really, the ones where you can have a far-reaching impact, and then trickle its way down, I believe, to, somebody who's built a home before and looking at that, like, you don't even, I mean, if you look at it, it's not even utilized there, right? Like, I just think there's some opportunities. A lot of technology exists to be able to be far more efficient by utilizing technology, and this is a perfect example of one way to do it.
Hey, this is so inappropriate, but I don't care. Your house, is it really kitted out with lots of tech, or are you like, I have a Nest thermostat and a...
No, I would say I've approached it very practical, and the things that we use. I used to have an audio video integration company, so we spent a lot of time in it, and it's I would say we've done what is comfortable for myself and my wife and kids, but yeah, nothing crazy.
Amazing. Speaking of spending money, if you had, I'll make this number up. Is $10 million a lot? I have no idea. If you had I'm just going to, $1 billion. If you had $10 million to invest in real estate, where would you put it? This is like this is not about insider trading or anything like that. I'm just kind of thinking about trends and where you think the big bets are.
Yeah. I mean, so I'll do one part personal, one part like professional or industry. I mean, I would heavily invest in a platform company that is really in this sort of building operation, building management side, and really getting into sort of the connectors of all of those different systems, where a lot of times that's where this stuff is going to break down. So figuring out how to take existing buildings with the least amount of friction that you can to bring technology to them. Like, again, that's very rare, but I would look at across those systems that are there, and I really, really like the building OS side of the industry, and I'm bullish there. I spent a lot of time there. I like it. I think it's super early in it. It's going to be reimagined of what it has been like back in the BACnet days to what it is currently today.
By the way, I love that term, building OS. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, I can't. I've heard it somewhere. I won't take credit for it, but
I'm just saying it's like, but that's a really awesome description, because I think people fundamentally understand what that means.
Yeah,
it's very different than automated.
Well, I would take some of the things that we know about operating systems, like of our phone, and really apply them to the building. Like this concept and idea that multiple identities on there. I've got the ability, like an app store based off of, right, like and it's a fascinating way to customize a standardized product, which I think that is what buildings are looking for and need, especially as you see the usage change that they have of them. Like when they go for, buildings are becoming dynamic, so the things within them that function have to be dynamic. It's not just about moving furniture around. Like this technology is going to have to be dynamic as well. So I would do that. And then I guess if I took that $10 million someplace else, I actually would love to spend a whole lot of time on accreditation and really training and getting people that are outside of our industry and inside our industry, elevate the level of technical knowledge and some of the newer stuff, and try to show that this is a place that, I don't know, like alternatives to college and things like that. Like I think there's an opportunity there to give back, but then also help escalate and accelerate, I guess is the right word, accelerate the adoption of these things, that people were far more comfortable with them, and that were more knowledgeable. I think there's a real opportunity that we would see accelerated growth if people understood them better. So I don't know, somewhere around the education side, I would love to spend more time.
Well, it's an interesting thought, because for me, it's like, if you were to tell someone, or someone who's interested in kind of getting involved in sort of the real estate sector, like where do you recommend that where do you think they should start? I mean, I love the idea you're talking about, education and really kind of elevating the industry. But like, where else do you see major growth happening for people who want to kind of get started?
Yeah, I think it's an awesome opportunity. I think right now, with like disruption in the education, the sector that everyone's talking about now, that there's a massive opportunity there. And I think if you mix that with the trades, and then the trades don't get as much credit, and it's again, we go back to the term, like the sexy side of it. It's not always seen as a glamorous thing, but it's massively important. It's a fantastic way to get personal wealth and to give back. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it that I do think, if we can elevate in some cases. I do a newsletter, and we're writing about it this week, around this idea around a system software integrator versus a dealer or an installer, which those are needed. But I also think there's an opportunity to elevate in some of those cases. And I think some of it will come down to more certification and training, and to build it. If you build it, I think they will come. Like, I really believe that.
Awesome. I love it. And I think I have one last question, since we're at our time.
Sure.
What important truth do very few people agree with you on? And this is kind of something that the co-founder of PayPal likes to ask, but it's a really interesting question. What do you firmly believe that other people just don't? They just go, yeah, man, no, I don't, I'm not with you on that.
So I don't have a single thing that's like, I'm on the outside looking in, like on that side, but I would say, because I deal with this on within our industry on a heavy side, is number one, the importance of storytelling and the ability to do that. Mm-hmm. I think, coming from a very technical community and background, it gets undervalued immensely, and we overvalue the technical side that goes there. And so I think that's one truth. I believe the self-awareness and emotional intelligence, how important that is I do believe there's people heavily in our industry that push that stuff aside and look at it as woo-woo. Mm-hmm. and undervalue it immensely, and they spend so much time on the other stuff that I do find I find a lot of friction from people that when we talk about that stuff, they fight it. But I think that has to do actually more with the emotional intelligence and self-awareness side of it, and them being uncomfortable. It's like, yeah, it's this vicious loop. Mm-hmm. But it's something I learned not too long ago that I've been spending a lot of time on myself, that I see the value in, just not from the work side, but at home and that I think is. Man, it'd be I think a lot cooler and a better place to work if we got along and could have debate that was not rooted in personal attacks and stuff like that. Would be kind of cool.
We're at time.
All right. Sorry for all the glitches. Whoever's going to edit this thing, I apologize.
Hey, before we do sign off, since we are editing. Yes, I just want to ask you, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't yet? And if you have time to do so, we can.
I mean, we were on a good gamut of things. That was good.
Thanks. Yeah, it was great answers, man. I mean, obviously you do this all the time, so I was expecting. I
appreciate that.
Expecting that. What about our friends on the phone here? Are they still on, or? Give him a second to get off of mute.
I hit chat. Said hi.
Oh,
I think we're done.
Oh, that's right. She wasn't actually listening. She was just. I'm there on chat. Yeah, man. I don't know how any of this stuff's going to get done between you and me.
Yeah,
honestly, I just don't know.
So, hey, and if there's through this conversation, I'd love to dig in more and understand what you all are thinking about and looking at too. And if there's, if people within your group are looking at access control or visitor management and trying to understand, I'd love to have just the conversation, because I love having the conversation. And I think the more we have it, the easier it will be to get done. But I don't know either, to be honest with you. It's a huge problem.
Well, I know we're connected on LinkedIn now, but we should connect offline, because I'm part of, I hate using the word task force because it feels very consultancy, but I'm part of like a group of senior leaders at the firm who are working on not only the return to office, but also what the sort of the long-term sort of 5-year and onward plan is in terms of how we want to reinvent it. That's why I know that we're not going back to the way it was. And I know that we need to change things, and we're going to use this as a moment in time to, I hate the word pivot too, but we're going to change,
Yeah,
we're probably going to go to ABW. We're going to change all of it. How quickly, I don't know, but it's happening. So we should find a time to maybe connect offline to talk about that, because I don't know how any of this is going to get done.
Yeah, I'd love to. I agree with you. And the other part I find the problem is that a lot of the people that are going to work on it are trying to keep up right now with just executing what's in front of them, and needing to have people to think about what are the next steps that are going to happen forward. I think there's going to be a nice coordination and dance that has to happen between those, because I've been in a lot of conversations where people are you could tell are not attached to the realities of how things get done today, and then there's a whole bunch of people on the attached to reality how they do it today that aren't doing stuff, setting themselves up for tomorrow. And so like someone's got to be putting that glue together.
I know, and things like they can't even figure out the HVAC. I'm going to go, okay, well, I don't want to come to the office and say, you guys put on some new HIPAA filter.
Yeah, trust me, if you can't open a window either, but they're like, you need to open up windows. You're like, well, I can't.
Can't open a window.
Okay, I'm going to tell you then. Well,
No,
cool.
Because
let's keep in touch. I'd like that. I appreciate you did a good job on this, so thank you.
Oh, thanks. Likewise. So thank you. I guess I should say thanks. So thanks so much for spending the time. I mean, we were talking for an hour. It felt like, I don't know, an hour. No, it didn't feel like an hour. It felt like 10 minutes. And I learned a lot, which is I always love to do. Learned hopefully things that people who are watching this didn't know either. It's a really fascinating industry, and an amazingly fascinating time to watch the evolution of what's going to happen this next kind of 2 to 5 years. I think we're going to see a whole new work experience and a building experience that's going to make our lives so much better. Might be a little bumpy getting there, but I think it's going to be great once we're there.
Agree wholeheartedly, and I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation. That's my great desire, is to have that. So this has been fun, and I learned from it as well, and I'm appreciative to have the opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I guess we'll just press the end button now.
Yeah, there we go.
Be well. Thanks. Thanks so much, Lee.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.